Okay, my first question that I'm reading is what path did I take after graduating from St. Mary's? Okay, we're on the same path.
Yeah.
Okay. Um, Graduating from St. Mary's with my degree, I went another year for obtaining a teacher's credential in the state of California. So uh, at that time, St. Mary's Education Department had one of the most uh, prestigious uh, credential program in the state. And when I did finish that, I received my teaching credential, which was considered a life credential, which means that my coursework was so thorough that I didn't fall into the category of having to renew it. And I know that I had ran into other teacher colleagues of mine once I became a teacher that they were in those situations. They had to keep renewing their credential after so many years. But fortunately, mine was a life credential. So on receiving that, I entered into the field of becoming a classroom teacher. And I finished that program in May of 1975. And I had been at the campus. This would have been it was my sixth year being on the campus because the first 4 years uh, I was involved in the boycott with the basketball team, and I was suspended for playing for a year. So I was given the opportunity to come back another year to finish out that athletic pursuit and take some other classes at the same time. So I did finalize my BA, and that was the class of '74. Right. I should have graduated in '73 if I had been on that timetable, like the same year Mushir graduated. But I did that extra year because I was suspended from playing. And I graduated um, as a student of that year of '74. But as I had mentioned in an earlier interview, St. Mary's gave me the opportunity to attend in the education school to earn and receive, my teaching credential. And after that, and that was in 1975, I had been on the campus for 6 years. And I could tell you I was feeling it that I said, wow, I'm the old man up here. Everybody's gone. I'm still up here. But um, I didn't go to work immediately as a teacher because I had been doing the educational pursuit in life for those 6 years with all the other activist things I was involved in. I just took a time out and didn't do anything. So from May of 1975 until January of 1976, I just was like just relaxing and taking it easy and pursuing what directions I was going to go in. I knew I was going to end up in the teaching field because that's what I got my credential for. So in January, I applied for a teaching position in Oakland Unified School District. But at that time, it was impossible just to walk in the door and get hired as a teacher because there were so many candidates had been waiting for openings to be in the teacher. So the protocol was you get on the substitute list, and that's how you start in on the ground floor. So in January of '76, I became a substitute in Oakland Unified School District, and I was going to different places, giving phone calls in the morning where somebody called in and needed a sub, and I did that from January all the way till June that year in '76. And then, of course, school was out, summer vacation was up. And when school started back in September, I got a call from the sub office, and the lady who I knew told me there was a long-term sub position at Westlake Junior High School in September of 1976. and it was an art class. And I had an art credential. So, it was like it was fit to made for me to be able to move into that territory and have some type of, curriculum ideas to carry out the year. So I obtained that long-term position, which I taught art, and that was in, like I said, 76, and that was the bicentennial year. I remember that strongly, where that was the key saying that was going around, 200 years of this country's independence. So being a long-term sub, they have it in the contract that you can only work up to so many days in that long-term position, and then the district has to terminate your long-term contract. And then you would have to start all over again because by whatever regulations and laws they had, if anybody works over that time zone, then the district has to hire you full time. So there I was as a sub, and I was still in that protocol of my turn that maybe I could get to where I could get a full contract, as a permanent teacher. But it turned out that the principal at the school I was working, he was really impressed with what I was doing with the students, and he really wanted me to have that position. And it just so happened that the person who was in charge of hiring in that department just so happened to be the man who was the vice principal at the junior high school that I went to. So he pulled some strings to make sure that they could override the contract, and I was hired in that year. So that was like in June of '77. I had received a full-time teaching position as an art teacher at Westlake Junior High School. And from then on, I was a teacher up until just 2 years ago. This would be my third year of being retired. So a total of 46 years, I was a classroom teacher in Oakland. And I taught at 3 different schools. Westlake Junior High was first, and then I transferred to Cole Middle School, which coincidentally was a school that was in the neighborhood where I was living in West Oakland. And it was an elementary school when I was a kid. And I attended that school, from kindergarten to 6th grade. And then I ended up being a teacher at Cole Middle School. And the school district was in the process of shutting schools down. And this was all in, because I went there in 2003. And I believe, just on memory vaguely, in 2010, they were in the process of closing Cole Middle School down, shutting it down. And they had revamped another school, which I was a student of, called Lowell Junior High School. They had gutted it out and recycled it with a whole new curriculum and administrators. So there was no need to have 2 middle schools in West Oakland that were so close to each other. It's like maybe 8 or 9 blocks from each other. So they had not opened up the new school. It wasn't completed in its fruition as of yet. But I still had a year to go before whatever that policy was for all of us who were teaching at Cole that was phasing out, to transfer and go to another school. So I opted to transfer to go back to Westlake. So that was going to be my last year, which it was, for teaching in the Oakland Unified School District. And at the end of that year, I retired from Oakland Unified School District and pursued a position for KIPP Charter School that was in Oakland. And I believe it was about a year that had gone by in that interval, or a half a year, that I had met one of the administrators at KIPP Middle School and interviewed for a position, and they didn't have anything open at that time. But I was called by them, and there was a fifth grade math teaching position open, and I applied for that and got that position. So I worked for the charter school for 11 more years or 10 more years. I can't remember the exact time, but it was close to 10 or 11. But I totaled out 46 years of being a classroom teacher in Oakland. So St. Mary's, because of its teaching credential, that is what delivered me into a lifelong, career.
Okay. So St. Mary's, you spent from what I understand, you did an extra year in undergrad.
I did.
And then from there, you got your teaching credentials at St. Mary's,
Right.
and it was a lifetime credential, so you never needed to renew it ever.
Never.
Like the entire 46 years.
Never.
Wow.
And it got to a point where people were saying that it was like a grandfather clause because they had stopped doing that.
Mm-hmm.
But since I was in it, they respected and honored that for all people who had that.
Oh, wow.
We never had to do that. So that was like pretty cool.
Mm-hmm. So,
Yeah.
like the second question under that, you do think that St. Mary's definitely prepared you for life after college and your career, socially, personally, all of that?
St. Mary's, outside of being a professional educator, personally and socially, it also prepared me to deal with a more diverse world that I was unfamiliar with in my early childhood before I came to St. Mary's. And I have said this in other, interviews, which, I don't want to repeat all of that because it's there. But, I grew up in an all-black neighborhood, predominantly black, and all the schools I attended were predominantly black. There was some Latinos there that lived in the neighborhood, but it was like 98% black and then 2% other. And most of that other would be the Latino population that also was living in West Oakland. So coming up to St. Mary's was a culture shock, living on the campus where it was the other way around. And, I was a person that was in an extreme minority position, just like the other blacks who came up to the school right when I did or before I did. So we were in a whole different social environment. So all the things that we've talked about with our struggles, the boycott, the ethnic studies classes, all those things gave me a preparation for dealing with a world post St. Mary's, because I had met so many people from different ethnic backgrounds and learned from them on personal relationships, so that when I did, we say the real world, got out into the real world, that, I was able to have grown and expanded just my personal relationships with only black folks. And it grew to where I had met so many Latinos here at St. Mary's. And I already knew how, I won't say speak it, but I knew Spanish. I took, I went all the way up to Spanish 2. In 11th grade, that's when I stopped. But I knew how to read and I knew vocabulary, but I couldn't speak it. I didn't have anybody to practice speaking it with. And like I said, the Latino community that was at our high school, it was very, limited, and basically they were doing their thing and the blacks was doing our thing, but we were working together. And I'll just mention this on just with the knowing and meeting the Latino students at St. Mary's, but at McClymonds, that was my high school, even though the Latino community was very small, but we were as one. And in 1967, the 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 homecoming runner-up in 1967 was a Mexican girl. I can't remember her name, but she got so many votes that just showed, that there wasn't any type of resentments or cultures, that we were as one. And I took that with me coming here with St. Mary's, and when I met the Chicano students that were all revolutionaries at that time too, and we just bonded together. And I strongly, gravitated toward them because I was curious about learning how to speak Spanish. I could read it and write it, but I wanted to learn idioms, how to say things. And they were Chicano students. They were speaking Chicano Spanish, not Spain Spanish or somewhere else, but it was here, what you would say in the Mexican community in Oakland and where they were from in Los Angeles. So I got a lot from that and had some very wonderful times with them. And the last year, in my first 4 years, I took a class on Eastern philosophy. It was the first time I had ever taken a night class. So I said, I'm going to try this. And Mushir and I were roommates that year. And I told him, I said, man, I'm going to take this class on Eastern philosophy. You want to take this class too? And he didn't want to do it. He had other directions he was going into. But it was a wonderful experience that after dinner, that's when the class was held. And if I remember right, it was in Dante Hall. And I can't, maybe it was from 7 to 8:30. And the teacher who was teaching the class, his name was Robert Hass, Haas. And Robert Hass was the poet laureate of the country, either at that time or before that. And he was teaching at the University of California in Berkeley. And he came and took that night job up in St. Mary's for whatever reasons that he had. We had a small class, about 12 people in there, 13. So in his class, I got exposed to Asian philosophy. And I learned about Buddhism and Taoism, Confucianism, Hindu, and it just opened me up to a whole nother realm of understanding another culture. Not that I was directly involved with it, but I had been exposed to it. And Mr. Hass was such a great instructor. He always had us, the class, going into Berkeley. And there are these kind of like arty theater locations where they would show all of these, I would say, I don't know if this is correct to say, but foreign films, if that's appropriate. But I saw so many Japanese samurai films and Japanese drama, by attending those. And then there was another one, it was about a Hindu film called the Apu Trilogy. And that was a very deep learning experience for me. So once I arrived at my first job at Westlake Junior High School, their population was like about 35% Latino and 40% Asian, if you follow where I'm going. I had been, because of St. Mary's, exposed to Latino culture, and then from Mr. Hass's class, Asian culture. And I was 26 years old, and I wasn't that much older than the students because they had a ninth grade there, and those kids were like 14 and 15 years old. But once the Latino students saw that I was very enthusiastic about speaking Spanish with them and in their culture, they just embraced me just completely. And the Asian students also picked up on that for me because I knew about their culture and was open to them sharing with me. So here I was, this black dude on this campus, and here's a teacher that's a black teacher opening up to our culture. That was something new for them. And like I said, I was very, very young at that time. And being at St. Mary's, I just reiterated that social life, that part of my existence here gave me an edge. It gave me an advantage on able to deal with the student populations that was so diverse, completely different from where I went to school, an all black school. And, I can just share with you all in this conversation that at Westlake, maybe in my second and third year there, they started something at the school called Teacher of the Month or Teacher of the Week. I think it was Teacher of the Month. The students named me Teacher of the Month like 5 months in a row. And some of my peers were getting suspicious of it. I think they were a little jealous about it, but I was just so well loved by the kids because I lived their life. I lived their experience, and I knew about their experiences. And especially with the Latino students, I could speak to a certain degree their language. And that just made me an overwhelming popular teacher at the school, which eased me into feeling very comfortable with, where I was. So that part of my life at St. Mary's, that was very significant.
Do you have the list of the 8 questions? Do you want to ask? We kind of talked about the first 2.
So that was all question 1, or was that 2?
It was like 1, but I was kind of spinning off at asking like follow-up questions.
Okay.
Just like when you were talking about how much what you're saying, correct me if I'm wrong, is like St. Mary's prepared you to be able to connect with students in your teaching career, is what you're like kind of explaining.
Right.
Yeah.
Students.
How important that is to be able to relate to the student population. Yeah.
Students who were not black.
Right.
See, I had a very strong black presence
Yeah.
because I was like still talking all the time to black students about their cultural identities and what they were up against. And I let them all know I was a proponent of Malcolm X, which at that time they didn't even know who Malcolm X was. Malcolm X had been forgotten. Dr. King, of course, was always in the public's eye, but not Malcolm. So when I told them about Malcolm and I would teach them about Malcolm, it was all new to them. And I've had some of the black students later on tell me in the years, Mr. Brown, I had never heard of Malcolm X, until you came and told us about that. So I was always delivering that message about being a black revolutionary at the same time where I was transitioning into integrating myself into other different cultural backgrounds. So it just made me like a full teacher that was not off into just my own personal biases or my own culture, which I saw so many other teachers could not do that. That's why I was always Teacher of the Month, all the time, because I had opened up to all the students. And I remember one event I did, y'all, just to share with you, is that those first couple of years, those first 10 years, I was an art teacher. And being an art teacher at that school, because Westlake was a school within a school, it was the centralized English as a second language school in Oakland Unified School District. So it attracted so many students, if you want to say immigrant students, would come to Westlake so that they would matriculate into the full curriculum. I can't remember the ESL classes that they offered, but they all had that opportunity. It was a school within a school. And they were funded separately outside of OUSD money because it was a state budgeted program. If I remember that right, I'm almost certain because I tapped in to some of the resources they had to take students on field trips, and I was able to get money. But that part of being involved in with the students, that being that art teacher, and I was having them paint posters and signs outside of just training them in art. I did a lot of fundraising events with them, and I remember during Christmas time, and this is like about maybe 1977 or 78. Now, this is where I could have learned more that I wasn't aware of at that time, but they always call the break in December Christmas vacation. And I wasn't conscious of students who didn't celebrate Christmas. So I was like into, all right, we're getting out on Christmas. This is coming up for Christmas vacation. And I had the students who were Christians in other cultures. I asked them, let's make some posters and put it in Spanish and put it in Chinese characters or whatever. And we had that all over the room. So even students who did not speak Mandarin or Cantonese and had another way of communicating, we had that all up there. It was just a big cultural center for expressing that holiday and that break that was coming up. So had it not been for me getting that exposure here, I would not have been enthusiastic about opening up and sharing with all those kids, because it was love. And that's what the kids felt for me, a love for them and a love for their culture. And they respected me back. So I would say those first 10 years, that they were excellent in that part outside of my academic training.
Just like from what you're saying, my experience coming into, like, as an African American woman coming into this campus, like, I came during COVID, and like, just what advice or like tips or just ways that a student of color or any student that's just feels like they're out of place here at St. Mary's and don't know where to start, how to network, how to gain that ability to connect with other cultures, because it's easy to be like, oh, like, I'm the only Black person in my class, like, I'm just not going to talk, I'm not going to give my opinion, there's nothing I have to say. What do you, because that's kind of how I went into this turtle shell of like, hey, where do I fit in? I'm the only Black person in my math class and my seminar class, and everybody's talking. Like, just from what you learned in your experience and how much, like, you were able to take that outside of St. Mary's and apply it to your teaching career and make other students feel comfortable about exploring other cultures other than their own. Like, what do you say, or like, what advice could you give me? Because now I have a different perspective being a senior now, graduating, how much St. Mary's has prepared me to be able to connect and be open to, and not go out in the world and have this us versus them mentality, and be able to connect with other cultures and other races in a different way.
The first thing that comes to my mind is something I said in one of the interviews after we met for the first time. A question very similar to that came up about, what do we do? And the one thing that gave us a lot of power within ourselves was the ethnic studies courses. And we had instructors who had got hired because of our protests and boycotts that we did. They got those job positions and they delivered. So we had a strong Black and Latino community. I mean, it was small, about 14 or 15 students in a class, but we were reading and being exposed, like in the Black ethnic classes, about writers and musicians, and it was empowering us and politicians. And the same thing was going on with the Latino studies. And I do remember that there was a group of Latino students who had went beyond having instructors providing them with a classroom, a curriculum type of reality they created their own class in one of the guys' room in Aquinas on the third floor, and it was the Spanish-speaking cultural group. I remember it, and I had asked the guy who was doing it. I had asked him, "Is it possible that I could come in and sit down with you guys, and pick up on learning some Spanish?" Oh, they were just loving that. I had an interest in that, and I was the only black dude that was doing that. I was reaching out, so I was in there, and I was picking up on a lot. Being in there, but on saying that, to your question, is that we had strong bondness first within our own cultural backgrounds, and then we would extend into the other cultures because we had that gathering place that we talked about in the past interviews called the jail, where the Latino students and the black students, we used to congregate there. The assistant deans for ethnic studies, the black assistant dean is Tommy Brown, and the Latino assistant dean was Harry Acosta. They had their offices there. And then all that big space was a pool table in there. Oh, we used to throw some parties over there. I mean, it was Latinos and blacks together as one. And with the music, it would be like the R&B, and then the Chicanos were playing their music like Santana, and we were all in there dancing with each other and drinking wine and just having a great time. But for now, because I really don't know by no means of what the isolation can be like as you're describing it now, if you guys don't have an extension with the other ethnic groups on the campus. But I mentioned this maybe in the second interview, is that what I recommend is that before the school year is up, that somehow organize in the cultural center and make a proposal and say, let's have some shared ethnic experiences together, eating outside or whatever. Let's just do that a couple of times and sit down and talk and get to share with each other and bond. And then that way, if everybody's under the same physical roof or outside in the patio or whatever, then the learning takes place and the hearts open up. And then once that is done, walking around on the campus, you have a more solidified background with you. You don't feel as isolated. Because I know those first years of being in class, I was the only black person in the class. Mushir and I maybe had two classes together, but we had two different majors. And we had one class our freshman year, which was a seminar class, which was a good class. So him and I were the only two brothers that was in that class. And then the next year, it was still the same way, just one or two people that was pursuing the same path that you were doing. So I did a lot like not saying anything and just listening, and a lot just sometimes feeling, I'm not speaking this language like they can speak it, because I couldn't. And, my parents, from their background, coming from 1920s and 30s and Jim Crow, Oklahoma City, and being raised in the country, that the Queen's English we were not speaking at home. It was definitely dialect of blacks. I wouldn't go as far as say Ebonics. That's a name it got, but we used to say country talk. Y'all speaking that country talk. So that's how I grew up, speaking like that. But of course, being educated and taking English classes and knowing how to read and write and conjugate verbs and the whole shebang. And English classes, being prolific with that. I was even a poet. Mushir was a poet. So we had command on the English language, but just speaking it, it wasn't at our the tips of our tongues. And I was conscious of that. That when I do speak, I have to be very careful because I'm not at home up in here. And I'll just throw in a story on that as we're moving forward. Being that one or two blacks in the class, that I remember that very first year I was teaching at Westlake, and I had made a statement to the class talking like I was at home, talking like my parents. And I told the kids this when I was introducing a new lesson. I said, okay, today I'm going to learn you how to do this. Okay? So after class, because this class was like right before lunch, and I had my door open all the time, and two very sharp black kids came over, seventh graders. One boy, his name was Darcus, Darcus. I can't remember his last name. And the girl student, I can't remember her name, but I can see them. Those two 12-year-old kids, they came over to Mr. Brown, and they pulled me to the side. And with their command on English, I knew they came from educated homes. They said, Mr. Brown, you said you're going to learn us. They were teaching me about making a grammatical error. That's how much they loved me and respected me and put me on awares, because I had just got off into, I'm happy here and I'm doing this. I was at home. I had dropped my guard. But that was the very last time that I did that. From then on, being a teacher, I was always aware that you are speaking in an educational environment. Be careful. And I carry that with me all through my life as a teacher. But for those two little kids that came over to pull their teacher to the side and say, watch out. But I can laugh at that now and smile upon that. But it's a true story. So being in the classroom, I was always conscious of that I could say something that wouldn't just come across. So I remained silent a lot. But in the ethnic group classes that we had, I became very verbal in that environment. And we all practiced on delivering our speech because the professors didn't allow us to go into dialect, which I call it. And we had to be profound with the uses of, we call it what you say, proper English, that we did that. In cases where it was loosened up, where you can just go back doing your thing, we all did that because it was just a normal for us to speak, under those conditions. So I strongly recommend, before you all call it a year, is go meet in the cultural center. Somebody take lead on that and say, we're having a cultural gathering, and invite open door, bonding with our cultural identity, diverse cultural identities on the campus. Of course, white students are invited. Everybody's invited to come in, and somebody can create prompts, to ask questions, to go around the room and sharing life experiences and so forth. That'll be a nice icebreaker for people to come in. And then on the second one, you guys can just take it to whatever level you want to, and then have some cultural event, like with some food, do some sharing with food, some dishes and some music, presentations, poetry reading, or prose reading, or whatever, to express who you are and from your culture and honoring your culture. And then that gives you more of a being. I am at this campus. I am on this campus. And I have an identity on this campus. And I have a forum where I can share that in with others who are experiencing the same thing I am, but we don't have each other to talk about it because we have not put that together where we can say that. So that's the idea that I have for that. for the campus.
Yeah.
Going beyond the campus,
Mm-hmm.
after you graduate,
Mm-hmm.
like now I'm an OG,
Mm-hmm.
and where the world is now, I'm so far removed from that. For young people, I watched being a middle school teacher, the changes that happened, especially with uh, the black political awareness, how it was destroyed. And for me, that was devastating. Being a revolutionary all my life, and that's when I came into the school system was for to continue delivering that message. But there was another message for the young kids that took over that. And I'll never hesitate to say it, but it was rap music. When rap music first started, it wasn't about gangster rap. There was a group, I was still young playing semi-pro basketball. I think a group was called the Sugar Hill Gang or something. They had I think that was the big first popular rap song. And then next came these rappers who were called gangster rappers. And the one who attracted the students was some dude named Big Daddy Kane. And he had this gangster message. And I watched the students gravitate toward that because it was the bad boy image. There was no more talking about revolutionary days anymore. It was all about becoming a drug dealer. And they started calling women the B word. Uh, and I was fighting against that, against the students and trying to tell them. I said, why do you think his name is Kane? Where do you think that came from? But I was talking over their head because that was the social norm at that time. I had become like a villain before when I was once the teacher of the month. Now I became the person that was going against their cultural mores. But I never gave up because I kept telling them the truth. Next thing I know, here come the videos. And more gangster rappers coming in. The N-word was all over the place. Once upon a time, you wasn't saying that. That was outlawed. No one was saying that. If you did say it, you were saying it at home or in a closed environment, but never out on the street. You're not letting other people call each other the N-word. We were not doing that. But it came back. And I remember there was a group, I think Ice Cube was in that group, NWA. I mean, the title of their group, I was just like, God, and the OGs my age, from revolutionary times, I mean, we were just appalled. What has happened? That this is the direction. And then the videos, and, it just went on and on and on. And when the Superfly movie hit, that just opened the door for the, we always say, when I say we, I'm talking about dudes in my generation, that it was all a setup with the CIA to first put the propaganda out there and get yourself a clientele base. You need somebody that wants to do cocaine, because in the so-called black community before Superfly, it wasn't about cocaine. The drugs that were being used up to that point in time, like when I was a kid, the hardest drug was heroin. Not so much in Oakland, but I know back east, like in Harlem, that was a big thing that was wiping them out back there. But there were heroin users in Oakland also, because I lived in the neighborhood. I saw them. And, we knew they were because they would go off into a nod, but it was more so smoking weed. That was the big thing, just smoking weed, and that was it. But after Superfly, here comes cocaine. And I remember going to a theater that was on Broadway between 12th and 13th Street, a little small theater. That's when theaters had one screen. It's called the Lux Theater, and you could see 3 movies, a triple feature. And it was like a showcase movie theater for the blaxploitation films that were coming out at that time. And that's where Superfly, I wouldn't say it made its debut, but I remember going to see it there. And the experience I had with that after the movie was over, I couldn't believe my eyes what I was seeing through the movie. That Curtis Mayfield wrote this, and Curtis Mayfield was a revolutionary artist. And he wrote a film that was projecting drug use. And I had some of my contemporaries try to defend that film, and we got into debates about saying, well, it's sending a message that this is not what you want to do. And I said, you think these kids are seeing a message of what you shouldn't do? They want to be like Superfly. They want to use and sell cocaine. Now, about 2 months before that, this is all something that's relevant to the question, that was the end of the black cultural movement of being revolutionaries, because there was a movie that preceded that called Shaft with Richard Roundtree. That was a positive black hero in the neighborhood. And you had so many people emulating Shaft, kids and the female characters. There was pride and dignity. And I remember seeing that at the Lux. I remember walking out of there being proud with the atmosphere in the theater, was up. We were still revolutionaries, still supporting the Black Panther Party. But when I walked out of Superfly, I could hear the kids going out singing, I'm your mama, I'm your daddy, I'm that end in the alley, I'm your pusher, man. So being a political-minded person, I knew what was coming next, and I had talked to some of my contemporaries. Watch, this is the setup. Next thing you know, here comes the cocaine that's in the neighborhood now. Here comes the artillery that you can get to establish your turf, and now develop drug-dealing gangs, and you can start killing each other over this drug. What happened to the black community that I grew up into right after college? And it just disappeared within a matter of like 5 or 6 years. That was over with. We used to have celebrations called Black Family Day across the state, across the country, and people were wearing their afros and dashikis. It was very black motivated culturally, but it was all going away. And the drug reality started taking over, and the gangster reality, it took over. And I'm dealing with that as a classroom teacher, and watching the kids being consumed by this. But I'm in there fighting every day and telling them, knowing they was hating on me, but I would always give them facts and truth whenever opportunity presented itself to tell them about black history. And I said, this is you being, you're not an involuntary slave, you're a voluntary slave, because now you are committing to a life of crime which will lead you into being incarcerated. And they call that the classroom to prison pipeline. I think that was the catchword that was going on, because no one was going to class, no one was studying, they were gang banging. And those glory days of black unity, I watched all that disappear. But I stayed in it all the way to the end, and I say in it, being a classroom teacher, and keep delivering that message that I started off to do to any students who wanted to hear it. I was giving it to them. And some of those that didn't want to hear it, I could hear them listening. And it put something in their mind to think about. And I've run into a lot of students, as I mentioned before, where I live. I still live in the neighborhood where I grew up and where I taught for my last 20 years in that neighborhood. And I see former students, as I'm taking walks, going down the street, and they'll pull over, and holler my name out from a car and stop and get out of the car and tell me what I meant to them and how much education I gave them about their black history. And even though I was a math teacher at that time, they would say, I learned more black history in your math class than I ever did, in my life. So with what's going on today, I wouldn't know where to begin being an OG. It would be something that when my friends that's my age who were also intellectuals, we have said a lot of times, well, it's nothing we can do anymore because when the time came for us to go out there and fight, we did our fight. It's up to the new generation now that they have to come up with a grassroots movement, do their organizations, and then attack the problems of unity in bringing that back. I wouldn't even know where to begin with that, but that's something I have faith and confidence that you young intellectual people will figure this out and say, we can start, first of all, right here, like Herman recommended, bond together culturally before the school year is up and maybe have one or two events, and then take that, because that's going to be a learning experience, and it will give you a lot of strength as you walk around and navigate the campus and seeing people that you probably never even spoke to before and be able to wave at and connect with, and it'll be a wonderful thing. And then that'll take you into whatever's waiting after graduation, like I took it with me. So that's that recommendation.
Do you have the 8? Because I have like a whole bunch, but I'm not sure which 8 we selected.
The ones from Viola's email.
But it seems like we're weaving questions in together, right?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, cool. That's cool. Because they piggyback over each other.
Yeah. I just sent it to you, Erica. Is there something you feel you missed the opportunity to experience or learn while at St. Mary's? I think that, like, you kind of explained, kind of told me how, and her, how we can try not to miss those opportunities, but were there any opportunities you feel like you missed?
There's one major opportunity that, retrospectively looking back, I wished that I had become aware of it, but at the time being here, it was such a volatile political time, and I was just so engrossed into being a revolutionary, like the Black Panther Party. I wasn't in the Black Panther Party. I used to go to their rallies, but I never was a written-in member. But I wanted to carry that message. And that message was so strong about family solidarity in the community and sticking with each other and defending each other in a hostile police environment, which is even hostile now, just like it hasn't changed. But what I look back on is the classes that I needed, besides taking my art classes and the ethnic studies classes, which was food for all of us at that time, taking us into a whole new conscious, excuse me, a whole new conscious level of going back from where we came, educated onto new levels of everything that I shared, and to take that back into the community. And of course, I went back to where I came from. Others did the same thing too, that we went back to black communities or Latino communities. A lot of other people, they went on beyond that and did other things in their lives. But I was dedicated into being an educator, and I made it my life pursuit. It was my career. But as time continued to go on, I started realizing I was not a person who was aware of capitalism. I was a Marxist. I was against capitalism. I was fighting for socialism. But that wasn't happening, and it wasn't going to happen. I never learned the power of investing. I never knew about the stock market, how that works. And when I was a student teacher, I was still at St. Mary's, and I did my student teaching because of that program that St. Mary's had, that you had to do 2 semesters of student teaching before you walked into a classroom. Now they hire you on the spot, and you do your training, as you're going along. But back then, and this is why St. Mary's was so, acknowledged for having a profound education department, that those were stern requirements, that I had a master teacher over me who guided me for like 3 weeks, because you had to do 2 semesters, and I had 2 classes. And I was a political science minor, and that was my pursuit, was to teach political science, because I had a direct hit for giving the message. But I remember being in the teacher's cafeteria, the day with the master teacher I had, whose name was Stan Vukovich, may he rest in peace. And it just so happened that Stan, he had come to McClymonds, my school, the year I was a senior. My graduating year was his first year at McClymonds, and I ended up having him as my master teacher. But there was another gentleman in the cafeteria who was the French teacher at the junior high school I attended, and his name was Mr. Davis. And I remembered him, and we talked. And he told me this, and I didn't take heed to it. He said, Herman, he said, look, what you want to do while you're doing your teaching pursuit, get a real estate license and sell real estate. And that hit me, but it didn't sink. But I never forgot it. Because as time went on, I realized I didn't know anything about real estate. I didn't know anything about investing. And at the time, I didn't even have a plan to buy property because I was too much into the community. I wasn't looking at myself and what an investment at that time could have done over the years. So at St. Mary's, they had a major, which was economics. And there were 2 brothers that came from New Orleans that played on the basketball team as freshmen. They were what you call econ majors. They was a little bit different cut of the jib from Mushir and myself. We never associated with them, but we got along with each other. And, of course, we played sports together. But somebody had directed them from where they were from in New Orleans to become econ majors. I don't know what happened with them over the years, what they did with that, but I look back at that and say, that's something that I missed. So I never, ever learned the stock market, never. And I know some people that got into stock, nobody personally, but I knew some people that made a lot of money, from understanding the stock market. So that's something that I regret, that those earlier parts in my life coming out of having degrees, I didn't understand the economic system of this country like I wish I had then. So if if there's any opportunity that you guys could investigate it, take some courses in that, or wherever you would go, and start learning what our investments all about, and what's safe and what's not, and get your foot in there. And what about buying your first piece of property and all those things, that's going on around you that you could, establish some kind of grasp on.
I agree. The first time I learned about capitalism was with my ethnic studies course with Professor Viola. And I didn't really, I heard the word before, but I never thought it was, important for me to learn until I started learning about it in ethnic studies, and I was just kind of like, oh, I know the word. And he was like, does everybody understand what that means? I'd be like, oh yeah, like I understand,
Mm-hmm.
but I really didn't.
Yeah.
And once I started to learn about it, I'm like, this is important for me to know. I didn't realize how important it was for me to know about capitalism and the history of this economy until I got into his class. So I'm like really thankful for that I got into ethnic studies towards the end of my St. Mary's experience here for sure.
All right.
Mm-hmm. But I'm a business major, so that's like right up my alley.
Mm-hmm.
Especially real estate. I have a big interest in real estate, and I'm going to law school next year, hoping to specialize in real estate law. So.
Yeah. All right. All right. While you're young. Mm-hmm.
Did you ever? Well, I know you said it's an opportunity you feel you missed, but have you ever dabbled in investing or the stock market?
I never did.
Mm-hmm.
And but I was very aware of protecting my annuities that I had built up from teaching. Mm-hmm. So I was able to do that, and it really wasn't like a personal control of what I was doing. I was, and I'm glad that the school district did it, that they wrote in our contract that teachers would invest in tax-sheltered annuities. And fortunately, I was in that. It wasn't my doing. It was a part of the contract. So because of that, I realized, boy, I'm glad that I was able to get into that, because over my 26 years in OUSD, I was able to have those funds. And even with working for KIP, that educational group, KIPP, it stands for Knowledge is Power program, and they didn't have annuities like that, but you could get your 401k with that, and I was able to start learning about that. But for whatever it is, I managed to retire with a sufficient amount of funds and backup money to be comfortable with. So I wish I had got into the real estate, though. The real estate license, I wish I had done that. Just as something on part-time, could have done it in the summer.
We kind of like hit on every question, like by answering one, you kind of like
right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I saw when I read the questions, they're going to overlap over each other, so that's just the nature of it.
Do you, like, you may have said this or may not, but when you think about everything you stood for back then, do you feel proud now? Do you have any regrets?
I am very proud of my whole existence here at this school. I'm very proud of that. I'm very proud of myself, what I stood for, the sacrifices I made, because I was completely devoted to black liberation. I was a revolutionary. And the night before we did the boycott in Santa Clara, and I'm going to speak to Curtis Mayfield again before he did Superfly. Curtis Mayfield had a very popular LP. It was called Curtis Live. I'm sure you guys can find it on YouTube. But there was a particular cut called I Plan to Stay a Believer. And that hit me directly to the heart. And the night before that boycott, I think I played that song. It was on a turntable, a record. You pick the needle up and put it back. That's how it was. I must have played that 20 times because of that message. If you're curious, find it and go play it, because that was my song. So my pride of all those things just increased as I continue to pursue delivering the black identity and historical reality for young people. Always. That was my main purpose. and I did that. I fulfilled my mission. So I'm very happy about the people I met here. And like I said, I met Mushir here. And I know next week there's questions about our relationship. So I'll leave the depths of that, until that questioning. But I met Mushir. And that's a big, long story on Mushir and myself, because we're still like brothers. And that was over 50 years ago when we met each other.
And how have your ideas about like social change shifted over time? Like, has anything drastically changed about your views in terms of like the society over time?
It just has gone backward from civil rights movements that I was a young boy during that time. I was in junior high school when the March on Selma and obtaining voting rights, and watching on TV the water hoses on sicking dogs on people, and just I can do anything I want to do with you. You can't even vote. This watching all of that change and making progress. We had something to live for and something to hope for. That racial justice and equality was at our fingertips, but all the time it never was. And where it is now, the current administration and the people who voted for this person, they want it to be like it was before civil rights. This is what all the OGs talk about. When we sit down and look at it, was that this was something that was always hated, that you're going to give up white superiority or white privilege and move over to the side, and then have people coming in and replacing positions that you could say no colored hired, no Mexicans hired, and could get away with that. That's like the law says that you can do that. So once that changes, then I lost my job to this N or this whatever, whatever negative they would call Latinos or Asians. They felt that they lost a position. And it's always been the undoing progress over and over. And we just watched, when I say we, I mean my peer group, we just watched the level of black leadership on not maintaining all of those rights that we fought so hard for, and watching them slip away. And then to sit up and look, like personally for me, blacks for Trump, to see something like that, it's like, what happened? That who uneducated you? Or how did you slip through the cracks? Because now you working for the man. And the man is not doing anything for you. And the politics of all of that is just obvious for anybody who's watching it and keeping their eyes on it. And it's slowly being taken away, to a point where it will be a major takeaway, that it's going to just bam. Because I wouldn't be surprised when they come out with something outlandish, just saying, okay, well, discrimination is unconstitutional, but integration is also unconstitutional. A person who's running a business, because I saw a younger dude, when I say young, so I might have made in their 30s, about 3 years ago on CNN or MSNBC. He was saying, be careful, because what they're going to start moving into is saying that if I run a hotel, I can exclude whoever I want to from this hotel because it's my hotel. So it's an all-white establishment. Said that will come back, and it wouldn't surprise me that's going to happen. So I just personally see, but we've gone backwards and have lost so much ground. But then again, I surrender to the youth that a whole new Black Panther Party, the Brown Berets or the Latinos, like the Black Panthers, that there are some groups that can formulate into positions of getting messages out and rallying the people like Bernie Sanders is doing, fighting against the oligarchy, but for peoples of color. Because I watched all of these rallies against Trump being the king, but I see, that's a white interest type of movement, because now his policies have affected them, which they thought he was going to be for them. And there's the politics. Everybody looks at it their own way, but now it's affecting them with the cuts. So now they're rallying to get behind removing him. So the Black and brown communities could rally to support each other and continue to go like you're going into a law degree, is to have people that have law degrees like Jasmine Crockett to be able to be spokesperson and AOC, that can speak and know what the legal aspects of it all is, and what can be done and what cannot be done. But what can you do with a Supreme Court like we have? It's like, I look at that and just say, that they have undone everything. Like when they said that Trump, is immune to crimes, that the president can be immune to crimes while he's in office. They say, okay, you have a king now. So the only thing I see which will stop them from doing that is once they realize he's coming after us next. And they might say, oh no, we're going to put brakes on that. So keep an eye on that and see how many of those things he's asking to do that they put their hands on and say, you're not doing this, because this is what he's going to do. He's going to just try to usurp, the whole, structure of the government of checks and balances. That it's all just one, the executive branch, which is what a totalitarian government is. So I'm just looking at it where I am in my age, and I'm 74, is that the young people, it's on the youth that to do what you're going to do. Because I know, Barry, he's an OG too, but he still has that spirit out there, and he's still pushing for the change. So I have my faith in the youth.
So kind of our last question was, because you said you're concerned to the youth, like what advice would you have for younger generations interested in creating like a more just and peaceful world?
And also, along with that question, how many times in your teaching career did you have to find yourself having to uplift your students and the youth around you? And is it hard? Do you feel like it's harder nowadays to uplift youth and for youth to find that area where they can find hope? Because like in my social movements class, a lot of times my professor has a hard time getting us to shift the conversation in a positive direction. When we get to talking about just what you were talking about, the state of the economy, our political state, takes a negative turn. And when she asks, like, well, what are the things you want to see, or do you see happening? And it's just like silence all around the classroom. She doesn't. It's just she gets sometimes frustrated. She's like, come on, guys, like I know there's some positive things, and we're just like crickets. So.
I can feel myself being in that classroom, and then here comes the question, and then you run into a wall. Like, I don't know what to say. I don't know. But for me, I've always tore down that wall and say, because it's that everybody will have to do to create the environment positively. It has to come from them within first. And that means you have to have a lot of self-respect and self-worth. Your ethnic studying teaches you who you are to a much greater level than what you could have received it independently on your own. Because the ethnic studies classes, if the professors are doing their job, they will direct you to resources where you can go and research that you wouldn't know about, or certain authors or certain videos that you can have a lift of your awareness that you ascend to another capacity of seeing yourself as a contributor to not your own culture, but to the human family, that you are a part of it. Now, what I've always done in that was I've always had great self-pride, always. And I've always held dear to the teachings I received from my parents and the community that I grew up in. And I was a representative of my family first, and then the community of my friends that I went through my life with during elementary school up to going to college and then meeting Mushir and the others here at the college. And one thing I used to tell the young teachers who would come on board over my years of not being a young teacher anymore, being a teacher for 20, 25 years, 30 years, 35 years, 40 years, I'm the only person that would be in a room or a meeting that had more than maybe 17 years of teaching experience. So all of the younger teachers really looked on me, on Mr. Brown, how did you do this? What do you do? The kids are so disrespectful in the classroom. I'm white and they hate me. Or Mr. Brown, I'm black, but I'm not from the hood. They don't see me. They say, I don't understand. The list goes on and on where the kids can cut you off and shut you down. And what I'm saying, in essence, is what I told all those young teachers. The first thing you have to do is honor yourself. You have a teaching credential. You have a college degree. You worked hard for that. Your parents sacrificed for you to get that. No one can ever take that from you. Be proud of that. And wherever you go, let that be what you can just propagate from you. That you just send that message out without even saying it. Have dignity for yourself. Carry yourself that way. And people will pick up on it, not so much about what you say, but what you do and how you carry yourself. I would always attend school as I was a teacher. I was always aware of what I was wearing. I always was professional. A lot of years I would wear a tie, then I would stop, but I always stayed professional. And I never looked like a kid. A lot of teachers were doing that and trying to fit in, but I would tell them, I said, you don't have to do that. Honor who you are. Let them see you're not one of them, but you can open up to them and guide them. So for every person, if they have that self-respect and knowing who they are and knowing their history, you can walk through this world unscathed by anything anybody can insult you with or try to insult you with by calling you out of your name, and you know how to deal with that. Or even if you are being rejected for a position and you know why, because of the racism, it shouldn't deter you because you know what's going on, because you're aware of it, and you know that these things happen. But you keep carrying yourself with that dignity and staying that, like for both of you are women, keeping your womanhood intact at all times. Never degenerate to anything else, but think of your parents, the sacrifices they made, and you represent them. And then from you, somebody else can pick that up. 'Cause it won't be from what you say more than what it'll be on what you do, because action will always speak louder than words. And then if somebody entertains you to ask you to say something, then you can lay them out with what you know.
That last part gave me chills almost.
I know.
That was,
Yeah. I think that was it for our questions.
thanks. Yeah,
Today.
actually we hit everything.
Yeah, we did. We hit all of our questions. So thank you.
It's my pleasure.
Thank you. Yeah.
It's a pleasure to be here with you and to share my stories with you. And it's still a part of my mission of what I started out with so many years ago, is to share with young people. So if any of my stories, because they're all truths, they're real. And like when Mushir and I debrief, with his group, and, we'll call each other and share, what we said and, what we went back and forth with. But we always come to the agreement on that all we can do is just tell the truth, and the students, they'll know if somebody says anything different from us, that they'll know that's not the truth. And that's our job, is to give them the truth, because they are sophisticated enough that they'll see through some spin, because there's some spin doctors out there. There's one person that comes to mind. I can't think of this administrator's name on the campus, but they were talking about the black graduation ceremonies. And this person was talking to Mushir, and she had told Mushir when black graduation ceremony started. And he told her, he said, no, that's not when they started. And he gave the first date when they started. And she said, oh, well, I don't know about that. I'm going to have to go research that. And he told her, he said, research it for what? I was there. I'm telling you when it started. So people like that will put a spin on the history of this reality at this school. Because if you're an administrator and you don't know when the first acknowledgement that the black community gave for its graduates, you have no clue about that, you need to be enlightened. And Mushir enlightened her. So without that, she would not have known. So a revision of the history is out there. But when you know the truth, and what Mushir and I are giving you all, you'll know when, okay, this is BS. I know this is some crap right here. And then you guys will be prepared for that when you run into somebody that's going to try to spin you. Okay?
This is like the best experience to have before I
Yeah.
leave, to
I
have
know.
this evidence and like in writing and recording and in video. Like, I feel honored to have this
Yeah.
experience, to be able to have that and take it with me outside. Because if it wasn't for ethnic studies and Viola and you, I wouldn't even know half of the things that I know now, for sure. Yeah. But I was running late because Viola wanted me to give you this to fill out and give back to him
Okay.
on Wednesday.
All right.
Do you have a pen or something? You can.
I might